Morning. What I'm about to tell you might shock you, despite what you've been hearing on the news. But before I do that, please like and subscribe, and the ceiling fan is right there. So, is there a crisis on America's southern border? No, of course there's no crisis. The United States, the crisis, if you will, is that the United States has been meddling in Central and South America for over 100 years and trying to impose its will with regard to American corporate interests on the area. So every time there's a government that the U.S. doesn't like, or that the God forbid, socialist or communist, they're not going to play ball with American business interests. The United States gets in there and creates, foments trouble, and tries to install a government that is, of course, corrupt, but friendly to U.S. interests. So what has happened in Central and South America over the last 100 years is that the U.S. has destroyed a lot of these countries, and I mean that quite literally, destroyed their economies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, by forcing them, in many cases, to bend the knee to the U.S. and U.S. corporate interests. The people that are trying to come over here, first of all, let's get something straight. Not everybody in Central and South America wants to come to the U.S. because it's hardly the glorious place that it's made out to be. But second, the people who are fleeing the devastation and destruction wrought by the U.S. are trying to get away from that very problem. If you look at a country like Honduras, for example, it's a libertarian paradise. Is absolutely if you want to call it from a governance perspective and crime perspective, terrible. And that's all due to the U.S.'s meddling. Let me give you some knowledge. Up until the revolution in Colombia was fomented and Panama was created to build the Panama Canal, and then up until the 20s, the 1920 or so, no one cared about the southern border. People lived in Mexico, worked in America, lived in Mexico. People walked back and forth across that border like you would walk across the street. But it was then in the 1920s, after what we had done in Colombia to force the building of the canal, that a nativist sentiment took hold in the United States. In other words, where we don't want anybody who's not white Anglo-Saxon Protestant coming into the country. So the first thing the U.S. did, they created the Border Patrol down there. The second thing they did was impose a 10-year moratorium on immigration from anywhere, including Europe. And so what you have here is sort of the people in the Southwest, which, by the way, used to be part of Mexico until the United States stole it, if you will, via a war, which it should be kept in mind that we also tried to take over Canada at one point, while it was already Canada. The United States has said that the problem really is that we need a wall, and that's the problem. No, the people in the Southwest should realize that the problems, supposed problems, that have been created on the southern border have been created by Washington, D.C. Successive administrations, decade after decade after decade, have interfered in the political arena of Central and South America. This is the problem. Washington, D.C. There is no wall needed. You could take down that wall. You should take down that wall and stop meddling in Central and South America. Help build civil society. Let people decide who they want to govern them in that region of the country. But this, of course, would require the U.S. to not cater to American business interests. And this is the problem. This is problematic. Do I feel sympathy for these people? There are a lot of people who live in that border area who, on the U.S. side, who benefit, of course, from immigration, and vice versa. There is no reason anybody should not be able to cross whenever they feel like it down there, in, out, in, out. If you did that, people would be more than happy to stay in their own country if they wanted to. And if they didn't want to and they wanted to come to the U.S., so what? So there is no crisis at the southern border. The crisis, if you will, has been created over the last 100 years by the United States by destroying the economies, the civil society in a lot of the countries in Central and South America. So don't be fooled by what your government tells you. This is all a complete lie. And I urge you to start paying attention, because the only way, in other words, that the problem would be solved is to remove the border and have the United States stop meddling in the internal affairs of the rest of Central and South America. Thank you.